Awesome. So next up, I'm going to pull up Corey. Corey is from MassDriver. Welcome, Corey. Oh,
There we go.
There we go.
How it goes? Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Well, first off, buckle up because we're going to do a fast 8 minutes. Let me go ahead and share my entire screen. Okie doke. We good to go? Cool. So MassDriver is a visual development environment for managing cloud infrastructure. Our goal is to help engineers spend less time managing the cloud and getting more time to spend developing great features. We take care of monitoring, compliance, provisioning, secrets management, and a lot more. And all of this is done through a directed graph. So you actually draw your infrastructure and it takes care of the provisioning behind the scenes. On the surface, it's a no-code tool, but underneath the hood, this is all real infrastructure as code. So you can actually fine-tune everything about the platform when you're ready, even the UI. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a Redwood blog that's running and the graph that's running, or sorry, the GraphQL API running behind the scenes. And what I'm going to go ahead and do first, though, is just show you how to integrate MassDriver with your application. So if you have the MassDriver CLI downloaded, you can do mass bundle new. And the way MassDriver works behind the scenes is it's actually a package manager for infrastructure as code, as well as metadata for your applications. So we actually never get access to your source code. Everything you see here, we never touch your source code. So we kind of believe that your source code should be yours and not every company that runs your code. So I'm going to make my blog, and what you'll see here is the first thing it presents us with is different runtimes. And so for this demo, we're going to run this on Kubernetes. We're actually working on adding native support for different frameworks. So if you're interested in getting into our beta for the Redwood native support, send me an email at founders@massdriver.cloud or hit me up on Twitter or any other places, Corey O'Daniel. We're going to go ahead and select Kubernetes deployment. And then the next thing it's going to ask is what my application needs from the cloud. So I said I want it to run on Kubernetes. It's a Redwood blog. I'm going to use Postgres as my backend. And you can see there's this Postgres option I can pick here. So what's really cool is all of these, you see these are prefixed with MassDriver. Not only are we a package manager that you can publish infrastructure and applications into, you can actually define the types that do all of the connectivity between the directed graph. So I'm going to go ahead and name my Postgres connection Postgres. I'll put this folder for CI. So you would drop this into your CI, and this would send all the metadata necessary for us to be able to schedule workloads on Lambdas, Kubernetes, etc. I'm going to go ahead and switch to an actual fine-tuned version of this config for the rest of the demo. So what I want to go ahead and do is show you what is in one of these config files. So you can see here, first off, if we go back to the graph really quick, that's not the graph. You can see that I've got this input coming into my API that says I want it to run on Kubernetes. This actually configures the CI/CD. And what we'll also see here is that I want Postgres. This is what my application needs to store data. And so if we look at this config file lets you fine tune everything about MassDriver. You can really, really change a lot about it. And what you'll see right here up at the top is database URL. What's one thing that's really interesting with MassDriver is you don't have to manage secrets for infrastructure using something like Vault or cobbling together your own thing with LastPass. You can actually do something called dynamic configuration, where you can pull the configuration details out of the directed graph. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm building this Postgres URL based off of the line that's drawn in. If I do a Postgres migration to Postgres 15, I would route in the Postgres 15 database, redeploy, and that would be using that database. You can also do third-party secrets management. If you need your Stripe keys in MassDriver, you can also do that, and we'll take care of storing all those third-party keys. And you can also pluck IAM policies from infrastructure. So the infrastructure themselves are expressing use cases. So maybe you have an SQSQ or a bucket, and they will have fine-tuned principle of least privilege IAM policies that you can pluck off and assign to your application. And MassDriver takes care of all of the IAM and roles for you behind the scenes across all three clouds. So you can see down here is, this is JSON schema. If everyone's kind of seeing this, it's JSON schema in YAML format. You can do it in JSON if you hate the YAMLs like everyone does, but I love YAMLs, so here they are. You can see that I require this Kubernetes cluster. I require Postgres. And you can see I have a couple other types that I've defined down here that allow my application to work with any IAM that gets assigned to me. So this actually makes my application, particularly in Kubernetes, multi-cloud. Let's go ahead and publish this application. I'm just going to go ahead and do mass bundle publish, and you'll see it's going to publish into my package manager. And if I switch back over here, you should see that I probably have an update for my blog API, so I can go ahead and deploy this. The diagram is the source of truth. If we switch back to the application, you can see we've got TLS and DNS. All of the name registration and certificate management and refreshing those certificates is all handled by MassDriver. And what's really cool about the way that this is configured is I can independently configure the scale of my API versus my assets. And so V1 of this, we're doing this as a server serving these assets. We're adding CDN support during our beta. You can come in here and you can fine tune everything about how this is going to run on Kubernetes. So what I want to go ahead and do is show our bundle bar really quick. So this is just a source of a whole bunch of cloud infrastructure that ships with MassDriver by default. So like I said, it's a package manager. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Our team spends every Friday building best practice infrastructure bundles for all three clouds. And what's nice about this is we actually build compliance and security into every single one, and we consider it a bug of ours if one of these packages isn't passing compliance. So with MassDriver, all of these are open sourced. If you're not using MassDriver, you can still use these infrastructure components. They pass the CIS, PCI, and NIST benchmarks of each of the clouds. They pass ISO 27001, and they all pass SOC 2 and HIPAA. So you get a baseline compliance with your infrastructure out of the box without paying somebody $40,000 to tell you did it wrong. Everything here is either open source tools like Helm, Pulumi, I'd say Terraform, but that's not open source anymore. So you can actually extend this platform infinitely by adding these types in here. What I want to go ahead and do, though, is I'm going to hop over to a blank canvas. And what you can see is this is the application that I've published. I've tied an Azure credential here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to set up my blog to run on Azure for the first time. I'm going to drop it onto the canvas. I'm going to say API. And what MassDriver is going to do is it's going to introspect those types, and it's going to figure out a baseline infrastructure for the cloud that you're currently configured with. And sometimes it does really funny things when it lays out the graph. So you can see that it detected that I was on Azure, and it set up a Kubernetes cluster, a Postgres instance, and a virtual network. I could go ahead and start deploying this. But it's also smart enough to realize that this web needs my API. And so what it's going to do is it's going to figure out where to deploy this on this Kubernetes cluster and also take care of routing between the API and the web server. So this will actually project the API's protocol, port, and host name down into the web application so that it can route its requests properly. So this would allow you to also do the same thing on GCP. I'm going to flip back over to the Azure or the AWS version really quick since this is already deployed and we can do some fun stuff here. So I want to go ahead and deploy this blog API. Again, this is using Postgres behind the scenes. We take care of all the provisioning and state management, whether you're using Pulumi, Terraform, Helm, etc. I'm going to hit deploy here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is switch over to a tail I have running of my Kubernetes cluster. And so you can see here is as this is provisioning, what it actually is doing is it's also running my database migrations in sync with this deployment. So what's really cool about this is this all happens within my VPC. This is happening on private ports. I'm not putting a database out there on a public IP address waiting for somebody to come along and tack it. I have a baseline security here where only my application can access this Postgres database. And that is defined by drawing a line, actually having that source of truth in my infrastructure diagram. This all runs in your cloud, Azure, GCP, AWS. So that's the other thing that's really nice about it. You have that data locality, data residency rules that are yours. It's not running in MassDriver's cloud accounts. So there's a lot of other stuff that we do besides just manage that infrastructure. We keep things like inventory of all of the underlying stuff behind whatever a Postgres is. Like we said, we wanted Postgres, and in AWS, it gave us this Postgres instance. So we can see all the resources behind the scenes. We're bringing cost management into the platform in Q3. So you'll actually be able to see how all the costs break down from project to environment to the actual bundle and the underlying resources. Everything in the platform is customizable using JSON schema. So what you'll see here is when I click this configure, block. All these fields that are presented here is done with JSON schema and RJSF. So you actually have full control over what this panel looks like. So you can add it and remove as many fields as you want. So you can kind of put guardrails and control what your engineers are able to set on different things like Kubernetes clusters or networks. We also take care of alerting and monitoring out of the box. I didn't do anything. I have alerts automatically set up for my pod readiness, any sort of crash backoffs in Kubernetes. It's automatically configured alarms for my Aurora cluster, my Kubernetes cluster, and my VPC. And we handle the alerting as well, very similar to PagerDuty. We take care of secrets management. So in this web application, I defined that I needed a session secret. So you can set your secrets here as well. And we store that in an air-gapped VPC with in-transit encryption and per row encryption at rest that's rotated. All of the bundles can also ship runbooks. So you have full control over actually defining runbooks with your applications and your infrastructure. So if you have team members that are onboarding and they need to know how to troubleshoot it with different tools, you can put all of that inside of your runbook. We have automated SLOs coming shortly. And the last thing I want to show is this very common thing we feel like you have all the time, like, parity, like it worked in staging, it didn't work in production. One of the things that we have is this visual diffing tool where you can actually grab two different environments. And we keep track of every single deployment that you've made. And you can see I am not a JavaScript connoisseur, so it took me a lot of deployments to get this one running, but every single change is snapshotted in MassDriver. And you can grab those changes from deployment to deployment or from environment to environment and visually compare them and see exactly what's different in my configuration. So if staging was working, but production wasn't, maybe it's because I have the max capacity set to 1 CPU in production. Or maybe it's because I've got an older version of Kubernetes, or I don't have enough node groups. But the really cool thing is here is you can quickly spot the differences instead of trying to diff things between Terraform config files. So that was a lot in a very short period of time. So hopefully everybody's hair's blown back. Like I said, we're working on a native integration for Redwood. If you'd like to be in the private beta, send us an email at founders@massdriver.cloud. The platform is always free for under $500 of managed compute per month. But we're also doing 3 months free for all Redwood developers on top of that as well. So if you have larger compute than $500 a month, we'll give you 3 months free of the platform. That's it.
Amy's muted, but you're saying great things.
I am saying great things. I was just saying, I appreciate all of this stuff. DevOps is so difficult, and you guys have made it so easy. So, Peter, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that was really, really amazing. I'm wondering if I were to pick your platform today, which cloud should I use? Which one works best with MassDriver?
This is the interesting thing, right? Like, so what MassDriver really does is it kind of takes away a lot of the hurdles of the like tertiary services you have to learn, IAM, KMS, et cetera. And one of the things, and this sounds nuts, but especially if you're an early stage company, this really enables like true hybrid cloud, right? And so for earlier stage companies, I suggest using the right tool for the job. Like we don't do that with the cloud. We use the tool that our cloud offers us, right? Like, why are you using SageMaker? It's like, well, because we use AWS. Not because it's the best tool out there, right? And so with MassDriver, you can kind of break it up. RDS and Aurora is fantastic for transactional workloads. If you want to run OpenAI, that's on Azure, right? And so if you're doing just like straight up transactional workloads, I'd say AWS is a great way to go. They obviously are the market leaders. But what we're seeing with a lot of our customers is actually getting that $100,000 of credits for AWS for their running your transactional Kubernetes and Aurora over there. And then disclaimer, we're a Microsoft partner, but you can get up to, I think, $125,000 of credits through Microsoft's Founders Hub. And then you can run OpenAI over there. So you can actually kind of split and get almost $250,000 of credits. So that's what I'd recommend for early stage companies, especially if they've got transactional and they're trying to do some machine learning stuff with OpenAI.
That's amazing. Wow.
Awesome. David?
So the real answer is wherever your credits are remaining. That's where you.
I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, the funny thing is like with serverless, a lot of times like you do have like a bit of lock-in. Like IAM is the real lock-in of the clouds. Like let's be honest, right? Like that's the real hard part to figure out. But when your applications are running on Kubernetes, like you saw how easy it was for me to just run that on Azure. Right. And so if I'm using like common tools, Postgres, Redis, Kubernetes for my application, it's pretty straightforward. Right. When you start to get into some of the cloud specific stuff like S3, like you start to have limitations. If I ever really need S3, I got to run on AWS. But you can also bring in other things like MinIO, which gives you an S3 interface to Azure or GCS. Right. So I would say run it wherever you have the credits, but like leaning more towards a containerized solution does give you that portability, so it's easier to move if and when you have to.
Well, I never thought I'd say this. So first time ever recorded on the internet. You made infrastructure look simple and fun. One quick question. Doing serverless, one of the problems I had was I have to write to my database and I'm on serverless, and that means I have to open my database up to the world. 0, 0, 0, 0. So you're saying I don't have to do that anymore if I use MassDriver? Like everything's like locked in?
Yeah. So everything is in that isolated VPC. This is one of the things like
That's it. That's all I need to know. No,
that's all I need to know.
Good.
Okay. I won't go. I'll get off the soapbox. I was gonna say something about public IPs and databases.
Over to Ellen.
No, I love this. I feel like you like really approach two canonical problems that I feel like everyone complains about, which is I just want to write my code and not worry about ops, and then how do I deal with all these secrets? I also think the visual diff for what's different between staging and production is something I haven't really seen before that's really important. I wanted to give a shout out to Open Terraform. OpenTF.org is a group of people who've all gotten together now that the project isn't open source anymore or is changed license, however we want to talk about it. But the thing I wanted to ask, I think the package manager of having these best-in-class infrastructure patterns that people can use is great. Do you have a wish list for ones you're getting from the community? Have you started to see people kind of do things they want to host in MassDriver and put them back into your package manager? Where's the future of that going beyond the team writing them on Fridays?
Yeah, so we do a lot of them, and the way that we do them internally is essentially the engineer that has like the most experience with that service will work through that and work through the cloud publishes reference architectures. So we'll consult those, their best practices guides, what we've seen in high scale environments, and that's how we kind of back them out. So what we see less of in the platform is the things we don't have experience with. So I don't have a ton of machine learning and AI experience. So those are things that we're really looking for the community to start adding to the platform, but we will be working on those as well if customers start asking for them. So that's one of the main drivers that we have today is we have this internal value of like not burdening the customer with operations. And so that's why we have so many features. Every time we run into an operations problem, we build it into the platform. We dog food the platform 100%. So we try not to deal with this stuff either. And so when our customers say that they need a cloud service, like we will go and kind of act like their operations team, that infrastructure for them so that they can just keep focusing on their code. So that's the way we kind of do it today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.